and fully fund students.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I apologize. I was trying to rapidly mute it while I went down. It just did not work my way. But yeah, and
the good thing is you can edit all of this out.
Exactly. Filmmaker.
Money, man, life goes on.
Hopeful, yes I am hopeful for today. Take this music and
Hi Nitya, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody who is watching us right now?
Hi everyone, I'm Nitya. I'm 18 years old and I live in Bangalore. And this fall, I will be going to Dartmouth College to study computer science and philosophy. I also applied for financial aid. And so if you have any questions about that, I'm happy to answer them.
Perfect. Okay, so I do think that's the first question I'd love to ask. For anybody who is new to the concept of financial aid, and there is a big perception that studying abroad is vastly inaccessible, and to some extent it is, but how did you navigate the entire financial aid process to make your education a little more accessible to you?
Right. So I think that one of the first things that like the top universities in the US advertise on their websites, it's that they make it affordable. So like Harvard has a really good financial aid calculator where you can just enter your information and get an estimate of how much financial aid you can expect to get. And I think that was one of the first things that really showed me that, oh, this actually can be affordable. There is this huge myth that people studying in private universities in the United States have a lot of financial resources, and it's not necessarily the case. I think once you do your research, you look at the statistics, you'll notice that about like 60 to 70% of students are actually on some form of financial aid, especially international students.
Right. I think that's a really interesting point. And, I think that segues into my next question, which is, how do you think applying for financial aid is different for international students, and how is it a little more challenging? Because I've used the calculator you're talking about, and they always say, yes, this applies to like national students, but we're really not sure how it applies to your circumstance in particular.
Right. So it is fairly similar. I think actually as international students, we have a little bit of an advantage because we don't earn in, like our families don't earn in dollars, but the calculation that they do is all in USD. So actually what happens is we end up getting more financial aid, which is really good. So
interesting.
During the process, they don't really ask you to convert everything to dollars. They just ask you to like fill it out according to your currency, and then they will do the conversions themselves.
Perfect. And, just for anybody who isn't aware of how tedious it is to apply for financial aid, the amount of forms you have to fill, how was all of that for you when you were applying to Dartmouth?
I was lucky because my parents filled out all the forms, but I think it took them like over 12 hours. Like it's really long. They ask for like so much information. I think it's like tax documents, bank statements, like assets, investments, properties. And you need to like provide proof for a lot of that. So if you're doing it, make sure you just start early.
Right. Perfect. And what is the exact portal through which you were applying for financial aid? Any of the specific forms that you had to undertake?
Right. So as an international student, you fill the CSS form, which is available through College Board's website. Anyone who's registered for the SAT will know how to use the website. It's fairly simple. And then you also sometimes will have to email things separately to the college, and each college will have their own requirements listed on the website.
Right. And so just to break down for anybody who's watching this, how much financial aid you got and how you got it, what was the exact percentage that Dartmouth, offered to provide to you? And why do you think it was that number and, not necessarily lower? Like what made you competitive as an applicant for financial aid?
Right. So the general sort of breakdown is that if your family earns less than $65,000, you get everything covered. That includes tuition, housing, food, and plane tickets. And then if it's less than $100,000, you get your tuition covered, but you still have to pay some amount of your personal expenses. And then beyond that, you slowly start paying tuition. So I fall into the $100,000 income category. So for that, I got my tuition covered, but I still do have to pay for my room, board, and
living expenses. Perfect. And, first of all, I don't think I mentioned this before, but congratulations on getting into Dartmouth. That is a fantastic, opportunity. And, it is really, really competitive as a process, especially for an international student, especially for an international student applying with financial aid. What do you think made your application particularly stand out? And are there any recommendations you have for people applying to really selective colleges on how they could sort of increase their chances of either getting a better financial aid package or even the chances of an acceptance?
Right. So three things. first, if you're applying for financial aid, I would suggest that you maybe apply early decision. Especially at a need-aware school, they have a limited amount of money that they can give to international students. And a lot of times what happens is when it comes to the regular rounds, that pool of money for international students is already gone. And so if you're applying to a need-aware school, they will look at your application, they see that you need money, and if they don't have enough funds, they might just reject you, even if your application is amazing. If you're applying to a need-blind school, obviously none of that applies, but there are only 5 need-blind schools in the United States for international students, unfortunately. I just forgot what I was going to say.
You just forgot the third point. That's okay. We'll act like that was never a third.
Oh, I remembered. Second thing is that you can actually negotiate more financial aid. A lot of people don't know this. But so I know someone who got like an offer from Dartmouth and it was much less than the offer they got from Amherst. But if you just tell the college that you're in this situation, they will match the offer of another university.
Wow.
So just make sure that if you receive financial aid and you're not happy with it, just email them, just reach out, they might increase it. You never know what can happen.
I think the one thing Indians are really good at is just bargaining. I think if there's anything we can manage to do is get a college to match financial aid. Perfect. And, just for anybody who isn't aware, what is the difference between a need-aware institution and a need-blind institution?
Right. So a need-blind school doesn't care if you need money. They'll just look at your application by itself. They'll accept you, they'll reject you. And then if they do accept you, they'll give you as much money as you need. Versus for a need-aware school, they first see, do you need money or not? And then if they don't have enough funds, unfortunately, they will reject you.
Right. So like you were saying, there are 5 institutions in the US that are need-blind, which would be Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Amherst. What's the last one? MIT, right? Okay, and all of the other institutions, Stanford being one of them, is need-aware, which means if you did get financial aid from a need-aware school, Nitya, you must have had a pretty compelling application. Which sort of brings me into the next segment, which is, what were some of the extracurriculars you had, and how did you sort of develop them through high school? How did you find them in the first place, and what do you think made your application stand out at Dartmouth in specific?
Right. So I think that when it comes to your application, there should be just one thing that admissions officers take away, like just one sentence that they can remember you by. So I think for me, it was the girl who wants to combine art and science to make an impact. So I had a lot of extracurricular activities that were about science. I'd done science Olympiads, I'd done summer programs, I'd built an app and things like that. And then I had a lot of activities that were very artistic. So I paint, and I was teaching art classes in my community for a really long time. And then I also funded a science education outreach program for students with very little access to education. And basically, we wanted to give them a very strong foundation in the sciences and maths. So we would go there, we would do experiments with them, and then we designed a curriculum from scratch. And I think that was one of the things that I spent a lot of time on, and I think it made a lot of impact in my city, which is, again, focus on impact. The more people's lives you can make a difference in, the more impact you have.
Definitely. And I also think quality of impact matters as well. As much as scale is important, it's also how much you can change someone's life, right? So I think intervening at such an educational level, having such an early intervention can definitely impact a student's life for the better, rather than just, having your typical ordinary fundraising campaign where you raise X amount of money and you're not even seeing where the funds are being allocated.
Yeah. I actually started with that. So I initially did a fundraising campaign, and then I realized that actually maybe this is not the best idea. And so I decided to actually intervene at a personal level and interact with them.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because I think that a lot of students will look at the extracurriculars you've done and just assume you started off at that point with those ideas at that day. But the reality is that a lot of students just end up developing their extracurriculars, and they take multiple pivots and they change in their facets multiple times until you reach that one thing you feel will make the most impact. So, where did you really start off with, and how did some of those things, shift over time?
So with art, I started off at a very young age, actually. I just liked learning different forms of art. And then eventually, I think when it came to 8th grade, it was just by chance, actually. A family friend asked if I would teach their son, and I would just take an art summer camp. And I said, sure. And then eventually, word spread that there were free art summer camps going on, and everyone flooded in, and my house became an art summer camp, all 4 summers of high school. So, a lot of things I actually stumbled upon by chance, but then I found out that I really liked them. So I just kept going with them. I think that the way you develop your passions is you try a bunch of different things, and then you think, okay, I like this. I don't like this. Let's just go with the one that I like and see what more I can do to take it to the next level.
Definitely. And I think, it's also how much you can increase your luck by putting yourself in the right opportunities. So, if you never put yourself in that opportunity to try and, have that one art class, then it never would have turned into what it did eventually develop into.
Right. So like taking the effort to also like get to know people, make connections, just make new friends, step outside of your comfort zone. I think that like Model UN conferences are a great way to meet people. And a lot of people I met through MUNs became like partners in another project.
Right. So it's almost like, just connecting with people in general sort of help you have people in a network that you could rely on for all of your other extracurriculars as well.
Yeah, exactly.
That's super interesting. And, Nitya, another thing I wanted to know more about is, we spoke about financial aid, but, financial aid or, being from a resource deprived background doesn't necessarily mean you just need funds from the college. It also, trickles into various aspects of your life in terms of, the access you have to extracurricular opportunities, the access you have to maybe even the school you've gone to. So what is some of I would say some of the advice you would give to students who come from, a similar background and are trying to make the most out of what they have without necessarily being given an opportunity on a silver spoon?
Right. That's actually a really good question. I think the important thing is to focus on what you can do. Just don't think about things you can do. For example, really expensive summer programs, or there are research programs like Lumiere that are really popular, but they cost a lot. I think just put that off to one side and focus on what you can do, and you will find so many opportunities. I mean, I built my entire application around self-directed things. I was a self-directed creative writer. I built sort of my art business up from scratch. I would sell prints and orders. And then things like, helping people who have really less access to education. That doesn't really cost anything, right? Community service, like you put in your time, but there's no financial cost to you. So I think you will find opportunities for like no matter what financial resources you have. It's just a matter of seeking them out and focusing on what you can do.
Right. I think that's a really great point. I think too many people focus on, all of the things they don't have instead of trying to make it happen. And I think 99% of the things that you end up doing in high school are just a product of your, your effort, sweat, time, sleep, energy. But just making that one step, in the right direction to find that opportunity is what really counts. Some people do get that easier, but I think if you do try enough, you'll definitely make it over there.
Definitely. And like another point, even the best summer programs are absolutely free. There's like TASC, there's MIT's program, RSI. Those are like completely free. So if you think about it, there's a lot of opportunities that you have no matter what background you come from.
Yeah. And, on the point about summer programs, you're definitely right. I think the best summer programs across the world recognize the fact that they don't want their cost to be a hindrance to anyone. So, if you talk about like TASP, if you talk about RSI, if you talk about MITES, even I think to some extent SSP and the financial aid that it gives to students, there are so many opportunities for summer programs in specific that are just there for high school students. But I think the step you're supposed to take is researching. I think a lot of people, the information is there, but a lot of people just don't know about it. So how did you come to know about these things? Did you ask around? Did you research? How do you suggest that other students find those opportunities in the first place?
Honestly, I followed a lot of college YouTubers. Like my main hobby right now is binging college YouTubers.
College YouTubers, I see.
Shaurya, Sinha, USA, CatPath, Katie Tracy, I think all of them. I think the great thing about YouTube as a platform is that it's bringing information to people who are searching for it. So I think, with the internet and everything, it's not that hard to find information. Literally, you can just go online and type free summer programs and like a Quora page comes up with like a list of the best summer programs. And it's like, great, choose which one you want to apply to.
Definitely. Yeah, that's so true. And, thank you for the small mention. I hope to keep delivering information to people who truly need it. And, another point that I thought was really interesting, and I know you've created a video on this as well. To anybody who doesn't know, Nitya has a YouTube channel. I will link it in the description. It has very good videos. I checked. By the way, after our conversation yesterday, Nitya, I stalked your YouTube channel properly. Saw a lot of interesting content. But along the same lines, a lot of students ask, how can I get a research internship at, an Ivy League institution? How can I work with an actual professor? How can I get, practical, actionable, insightful academic experiences with academics themselves? So how did you get your research internship? And, what was that entire process like from start all the way to finish?
Mm-hmm. So, like, the first thing to say, I had no connections. I mean, like, dur takdi, I couldn't think of anyone who I could ask, like, for a connection. I didn't even have a LinkedIn account at this point, so I was, like, completely lost. I think the thing that helped me was like pitching all of my experiences in a way that are relevant to the research internship, because I had no research experience in itself. But, I had worked with a lot of nonprofits and I had like my own initiative, and I pitched that in a way that, I said, these are the skills I learned, and this is how I will apply it to your research internship. And I think that's something that a lot of students don't do. Like being a high school student, you need to show that you're capable of making a meaningful contribution to like a professor's work. And the other thing was just look up faculty profiles. I must have looked up 100, but I only emailed about 5. Only email people whose work you're genuinely interested in. And take the time to read their research papers. I must have read about like 5 or 10 of their most recent publications. And I talked about them in my email. I said, I read this paper. This is what I liked. I have a personal interest in this because I have done XYZ activity and I would love to work with you.
Right. I think even, in a very different context, but I, now as an entrepreneur with sleep deprived dreamers, notice that high school students are extremely, extremely talented. They also have the time and they're also willing to put in a lot more work than, your average employee that would be willing to do something. Right. Just because you end up caring a lot more about something. If you've actually gone and read someone's research, it shows you genuinely have an interest in what they're doing. And I think people definitely do respond to that and they recognize that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So how
I was at a summer...
Sorry, go on.
Sorry. I was at a summer program called Young Technology Scholars, and one of the guest speakers that we had was a professor at Northeastern, and he said, and this was really shocking to me, that he gets 100 plus emails every day, and most of them are from China and India, and it's students saying, I want to work with you in nanotechnology or XYZ, and he's like, I don't even work in nanotechnology. So, right. I mean, people just like write emails without even taking the time, and I think he said that he just deletes all of them without reading them.
Yeah. That's a sad part, but it also means if you have a really well-researched email, it'll definitely rise to the top of their inbox and they'll definitely take notice.
Right. So it's not that difficult to stand out. You just need to put in the effort.
Yeah. I feel the exact same way, as a content creator, I also have my inbox flooded and like your mail was one of them, but because of what you'd written, how you'd written it and how you'd pitched the idea of, talking about this in front of the entire world, I gravitated to it immediately. So I'm just saying your cold mails tend to work out a lot, Nitya.
Thank you.
And, on the education side, I was speaking to you yesterday and you brought up the fact that, you shifted from an ISC institution all the way to an IB institution. And actually, IB schools have scholarships. So how does that whole process work for someone who's coming from a low income background? And how did you come across these opportunities?
Right. So again, I came across this opportunity just sheer luck. I had like a mutual friend who said this IB school has a great scholarship, and I just applied and I managed to get it. But after doing some research, I found out that actually most IB schools have a scholarship program. All you need to do is go on the website, submit some forms, and just apply. And a lot of these are also boarding schools actually. So even if you don't live in the same city, you can apply for a scholarship and get it. I think that's a really great opportunity because a lot of people can't afford IB schools. And IB does prepare you for an international education. You can do ISC and CPSC and still get in and still do really well. But I think personally, I knew that I really wanted to do the IB program just because of the subject flexibility. I was able to take a lot of very different subjects. And I think if you're someone who feels that way, you should definitely try to apply for a scholarship. I guess you'll leave some links in the description below. If you want to go to the school, check out their website. It's a great process, and it's definitely you get a lot of great experiences at an IB school.
Yeah, and I've even heard, I think, the entire UWC collegiate system, the United World College, they also have scholarships as well for each of their institutions. So I think it is a popular thing for IB schools to try and fully fund students.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I apologize. I was trying to rapidly mute it while I went down. It just did not work my way. But yeah, and
the good thing is you can edit all of this out.
Exactly. Filmmaker.
Money, man, life goes on. Hopeful. Yes, I am hopeful for today. Take this music and use
it. And about schooling as well, and about education, I noticed you said you had a variety of interests, and even while you were talking about the extracurricular activities, you said you united like the sciences as well as the arts. And I think that's a very interesting combination because a lot of students feel like to stand out in the college application process, you need to have one thing that you're standing out for. You need to be known for that, one line, essentially like what you said, but you executed it a little differently. So what is your idea or philosophy behind a spike? And how did you sort of approach it throughout high school?
So in high school, like unlike most students, I wasn't that focused on building a college application. I was just, doing things that I liked. And a lot of times that ended up being all over the place. I was doing a bunch of different things. So when it came to sort of the application and I sat down and I looked at my activities and I was like, okay, what stands out? And I think a spike doesn't have to be a specific field that you're really good in. It can just be something that motivates you or like something that packages yourself and markets it as like one, single defining thing. So for me, I decided that that would be combining science and the arts because when I really thought about all of my activities and I was like, deep down, why do I do this? Or, what is different about this? That was the thing that came to mind. So I think don't worry too much about a spike, but when it comes to writing the application, make sure you package yourself in a way that's very cohesive.
Right. I think that's a very, very valuable point. And I think the biggest thing I also took away from, what you said right now is also that in your essays, you can sort of control how your spike comes across and you can control how your extracurricular activities come across, because that's where you really get to contextualize some of the things that you've done and talk about, why you really did them. And that's when you can sort of draw these links between things that might seem very separated and not connected, and really make a string that says, oh no, I really am passionate about unifying the arts and, maybe using storytelling as a medium to communicate the value and information behind the sciences.
Mm-hmm. I was reading this one post in Quora, which is basically where I spent a lot of my time. And this guy, I think he got into like 6th Ivy League, and his activities were like not at all related to each other. So his spike, he decided he would write his essay about, oh, I do all these different things. So that enables me to think from different perspectives. And I often find solutions that other people miss because I'm interested in so many different things. And I was like, wow, like mind-blowing moment, like anything can be a spike.
Exactly.
So I think, that's a great example of the spike.
Yeah, I think people sometimes, and I've made this mistake as well in the past where you're like, a spike is one thing. A spike isn't one thing that you've done. A spike is one thing that defines you. But what can define you could be a variety of things as well. It's just all about how you put that across. And that's really why I think, the essay section is extremely important. Which sort of brings me to my next segment. You said you're really interested in creative writing. You said you're really interested in writing. How did you develop that over a period of time? And what are some of the tips that you would give to students who might not necessarily consider themselves the best or the most creative writers or essay writers out there?
So for essay writing, there's obviously 2 parts, right? There's the grammar and then there's the content. For me, I was pretty confident with the grammar. I know a lot of people struggle with it. So the one tip I would have is just read as much as possible. Read anything you enjoy that's in English, because that really has sort of trickle-down effect and it really improves your grammar. You can also do things like send it to your English teacher or send it to friends who are studying abroad. Or, if you have friends that are really good at English, send your essay to them. I think grammar is sort of like the easiest part of the essay to nail down. And then when it comes to content, I tried 100 different topics, like no exaggeration. Like don't be afraid to throw it out and just start again. I think that's like something really important. And show it to people who will tell you the truth. So, show it to a friend who will be like, I don't think this is great. You can do better than this. Like get your essay reviewed by people who will be honest with you. That's, the best advice I can give you.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I think, there are a lot of people who will just validate the work immediately, but I think you should ask yourself whose opinion do you value the highest and who is most likely to give you like unbiased feedback. And, I was told by a lot of the people who I looked up to and I look to for advice to like ditch one particular essay and just like swish it into the trash. And I think finally, I listened to them and I don't regret it. You should try and take that advice. But at the same time, like, don't let anybody else convolute the words or the thoughts that you've already put into your essay, because it is it is a piece that is yours at the end of the day. You want to be proud of it. It's your creation.
And I think once you find that like one topic, it just feels right. Like, that this is the thing that you're meant to write. I definitely had that sort of eureka moment.
So what was your essay about? Like, what was that moment for you, and like, how did you get to it?
So my essay was basically just about combining science and art. And so I took 3 different experiences. If anyone wants to read my essay, it's on my channel, small plug.
Go right there.
But so the first thing was like linguistics, and how like I'd use language very creatively because I was a creative writer. But then linguistics is all about, they teach you how to think about language mathematically. And so I thought that was a really interesting sort of contradiction in how I sort of grappled with the 2 worlds, but then I managed to sort of come to terms with both. And then the second thing I talked about was my science education program, in how I was teaching science, but I was actually using the power of storytelling to communicate science.
Right.
And, that leads really well into science communication and how, that's one of my interests. And that's something I want to do in college. And then the third thing with my research internship, and this was a little bit more messed up because I talked about how the process of research is kind of like, to me, it feels like creating art, which is, weird. But I think your college essays are the place to be weird. And obviously explain that a little bit more, explain why I think the process is so similar, because it's really creative and because, it takes time.
Wow, those are really great tips. And those are really great anecdotes as well. I can see why your essay stood out. It just feels like it feels very unintuitive to combine a lot of the things you combine. And I think even though there is scope for it to go quite horribly wrong, I think you managed to execute it. As you can tell, you managed to execute it successfully.
Thank you.
And I think, towards the end of the interview, something I was curious about was, a lot of students, myself included, had, the opportunity, the privilege of, going to private counselors, maybe getting test prep as well. How did you navigate, test prep help? How did you prepare for your standardized tests as well as, just private counselors? What's your take on them? Do you need them? Do you not need them? What are some replacements or alternatives you might suggest? And I know you already have suggested a few, but yeah, what's your take on that whole space?
Yes, so you definitely don't need tutoring for tests. And you definitely don't need college counselors. You need people to review your essay, but it does not have to be a college counselor. I think, again, I would just say the internet has made everything so much easier. When it comes to, SAT practice, you have websites like Crack SAT, Crack ACT, you have Khan Academy, which is doing some great work in education access. And then when it comes to essays, again, you have college YouTubers. You have college YouTubers. Just go read all of their essays, like look at like examples of great writing. And I feel like that really opened my mind to the possibilities of like this essay can be about literally anything.
That's
and then there's
true.
Also, I think it's called College Wine, where people like peer review your essays.
Interesting.
I wouldn't know how much I trust that because of plagiarism risk, but
Fair.
I think, it might still be a good option for you. Also, like just like read a bunch of accepted essays. I think Johns Hopkins publishes some really good essays every single year on their website. Literally, these essays like blew my mind. Like they were definitely my inspiration for like writing what I did.
Yeah, I think especially with college application essays, the more essays you read, the better idea you have of what an essay could potentially look like. I think, when I was talking to my admissions officer, she said the one thing Indians are really bad at is just being informal. Their essays are so formal and it just sounds like the person is stuck up. But if you know anything about the US application process is that you get in primarily because of your potential and personality. So, try to shine as much of your personality through your essays while still communicating your potential to be a great student at these institutions.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's really great. And then, I think the last question I have for you, Nitya, is do you have any advice for high school students, or do you have any advice for yourself if you were, if you were applying today? What is something that you would tell yourself, applying for financial aid, applying to an extremely selective school? What is something that you might A, do differently, and B, tell other high school students to do?
Right. So one thing that I would do differently is worry less about the outcomes. I think that you need to have confidence in your application. And I think you need to do things that you're very passionate about. So even if you don't get into college, it's fine. You still spent 4 great years developing your passions and, becoming a better person. So I would say getting obsessed with outcomes is definitely not the way to go. And then when it comes to general sort of application advice, I would say that treat your application like a puzzle. So each piece should tell them something new. But at the same time, when you put all the pieces together, it should form this very cohesive and very memorable picture. Immediately they should think, oh, that's that student, and I'm going to remember this student when I read all these other applications.
Right. Spoken like a true art student. Make a nice picture, make a nice jigsaw puzzle out of your entire application. But I think that's really great advice. I actually do. I think that, it's useless and it's pointless to repeat pieces of information throughout your application. And, just make sure that each essay or each component is reflecting a different side of you, even if it's the same thing. The same activity could also reveal 3 different things about you. It could show how you're analytical in nature. It could show how you're creative in nature. So don't even look at, the number of extracurricular activities you have and think that you're limited by that. Think about how many of perspectives or layers to yourself you can sort of build over your application.
Yeah, and use the additional information section because you have a 650 word section, and a lot of people say, but I have only 10 spots in the Common App. Actually, you can put as many activities as you want in additional information.
That's so true. I actually have a whole video where I just talk about how you can use the additional information section. I'll somewhere plug that over here as well. Might as well self-promote while I'm at it. No, but thank you so much for this, Nitya. This was super, super helpful. Is there any last piece of information you'd like to give to the entire world, or maybe yourself, if you manage to come across this video on your recommended page 5 years down the line?
Let's say something really cheesy. So let's go with believe in yourself. Don't give up on your dreams. Best of luck and subscribe to my YouTube channel.
Perfect.